Thanks very much, Helen. Can I begin by acknowledging this morning at this very important reconciliation breakfast that we meet on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and that we acknowledge their ongoing spiritual relationship with this precious land. Can I acknowledge all of those members of the Stolen Generation who are with us here this morning, their family, their friends, their supporters. To His Excellency the Honourable Hugh Van Lay, AC, Governor of South Australia, true champion of reconciliation, we welcome you and acknowledge you here this morning. To all of the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, importantly also the many students who have got up very early this morning, many of them for the very first time to come along to this very important breakfast. Good morning to each and every one of you. I'd like to say that it is a fantastic sight, 1,780 people here this morning. There are very few other places in the world, very few places in Australia where we can have a breakfast for 1,780 people, and that's because of the concerted efforts of each and every South Australian who has committed themselves to making sure that we can keep our state safe. And in particular, I would like to thank all of the leadership in our Aboriginal communities right across South Australia who have taken action, proactive action to keep those communities, many of them very remote, safe during this particularly difficult time. So let's give those Aboriginal communities a massive round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this year's reconciliation is more than words. Reconciliation takes action. And we've just heard an incredible presentation this morning for us all here from Ellie Lovegrove and Tony Minicon, an incredible presentation which practically speaks to the theme of Reconciliation Week this year. Since coming to government, I took on the role of Aboriginal Affairs and Reconciliation so that we could have more than words and we could have practical reconciliation. One of the first things that we did was to sit down with the South Australian Aboriginal Advisory Council to develop our very first action plan. And now I'm very proud to say we've released our second Aboriginal action plan in South Australia, 41 practical examples of what we can be doing in South Australia to improve the lives of Aboriginal South Australians. And one aspect of that I want to share with you this morning is the release today of the Aboriginal Housing Strategy. This is a strategy which has taken some consultation with people right across this state to make sure that we could have and can have a culturally appropriate Aboriginal housing strategy, a standalone culturally appropriate housing strategy for South Australia. This has the aspiration of increasing Aboriginal home ownership in South Australia over the next 10 years. It provides for the establishment of an elders village to house 40 elders who are in danger of homelessness unless this is built. It provides money for important areas of upgrading to existing properties, also new properties here in South Australia. It's a 10-year strategy and over the first 5 years the government have committed, state and federal government have committed $83 million to that, and I genuinely want to thank the lead for this program, Erin Wolford, who I think is with us here today, and everybody that has been involved. Since we met a year ago, South Australia has signed the new refreshed co-design Closing the Gap strategy for Australia, led by Ken Wyatt and Pat Anderson. And this document is an important document, one, because it's co-designed, but two, because it has a large number of socio-economic objectives that we must all work together on to achieve. I have great optimism for this document and the practical ways that we can work together to achieve better outcomes. We also know that the federal government is working at the moment in response to the Uluru Statement from the Heart to establish a voice to Parliament. And that important work is continuing. Here in South Australia we are doing similar work. In fact, one of the elements of our Aboriginal Action Plan is a better consultation or a new consultation mechanism with Aboriginal South Australians, and I particularly want to acknowledge Dr. Roger Thomas, the Commissioner for Aboriginal Engagement in South Australia, for the work that he has done really over the last 2.5 years, consulting with the Aboriginal community in South Australia to put forward a voice to the South Australian Parliament and a voice to our government. I genuinely want to thank all the members of the South Australian Aboriginal Advisory Council for the excellent work that they have done, and many of them are here with us today. But I also look forward to bringing to Parliament in the coming months our legislation to enshrine a voice to Parliament. We had a small taste of this last year when Dr. Roger Thomas delivered his annual report to the Parliament. Now, usually this would be tabled by the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs and Reconciliation. It would be posted in to the government. Last year it was different. Dr. Roger Thomas came to the Parliament. He stepped onto the floor of our chamber. I think he was the first Aboriginal voice in the House of Assembly chamber of our Parliament, and he made that address to our Parliament. I want to acknowledge his great work and thank him for coming to Parliament that day. This year we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the establishment of Reconciliation Australia, and I'd like to acknowledge Karen Mundine, the Chief Executive, who is with us here today. Thank you for coming to South Australia and seeing how we do it here. I'd also like to acknowledge the great work that Reconciliation SA does. Shona Reid and her hard-working team, Helen Connolly and Peter Buckskin, the co-conveners. Australia is celebrating the 20th anniversary of the establishment of Reconciliation Australia, but we were the very first state-based reconciliation body. We celebrate our 20th anniversary next year. That RAP is the first in Australia. I genuinely want to thank everybody involved with Reconciliation South Australia, the Chief Executive, the hard-working team, the board, but also the many volunteers and supporters that are represented in the room tonight. The theme of reconciliation is more than a word. It takes action, and it certainly takes action for practical reconciliation. Reconciliation Week starts each year on the anniversary of the 1967 referendum. But the eve of Reconciliation Week is always National Sorry Day, which in many ways is a solemn time for our nation and for our state. South Australia was the very first government in Australia, not just state, but we were the first government in Australia to respond to the Bringing Them Home report. We were the first government in Australia to apologise to the stolen generation. We have been able to lead the nation in the past. I genuinely believe that we have an opportunity to lead the nation again. Today, we launched the Aboriginal Housing Strategy. We also work very hard in the Parliament this year to make sure that we can have an effective voice to our Parliament, an effective voice to government. So today, I think is a great opportunity for us to all recommit that reconciliation should be more than words, it should be practical action. Thank you very much.